Hey there, HorseCenter fans. Matt and I are back with another exciting edition of the show. This week, Matt, we're talking about the $1 million Haskell Invitational down there on the Jersey Shore at Monmouth Park.
Yeah, Brian, at one of our favorite places, the Haskell. Looks like it's going to have a field of 7 featuring the rematch between Maximum Security and King for a Day.
Yeah, the rematch of the upset, King for a Day over Maximum Security. Call it a rematch if you must, Matt, but there's also Mucho Gusto, Joevio, a few other interesting horses in this edition of the big race down in New Jersey. Plus, we got Game Winner, Mr. Money, Elate, and Sistercharlie, all starring last weekend. Watch it all right here, now on HorseCenter. Welcome to another edition of HorseCenter, everyone. I am Brian Zipsy, and as always, I have the outstanding pleasure of being joined by my co-host to the East Coast. That's Matt Schiffman. And Matt, besides the wonderful new shirt, I'm not sure the background. Where are you today?
Yeah, the background certainly doesn't give you an indication, but I am in Saratoga at the racetrack, in the back room, at the press box.
Well, back room or no, Saratoga is a wonderful place to be, Matt. So let's do this HorseCenter. We're not really talking about Saratoga too much today, though, although they had a great first week of racing up there in upstate New York. We're going to go down to a place that's near and dear to both of our hearts. That's, of course, Monmouth Park on the Jersey Shore, Matt. It's the $1 million Haskell Invitational Saturday afternoon there at Monmouth Park. And Matt, the name, despite coming in off the loss, the name of the race continues to be Maximum Security, the horse who finished first in the Kentucky Derby.
Yeah, that's for sure. Looks like a field of 7 is going to be drawn today for the Haskell, the signature event down at the Jersey Shore at Monmouth Park. And the weather forecast looks like no rain, Brian, but it's supposed to be extremely hot, upper 90s.
Sounds familiar. A little bit like the Louisville, Kentucky forecast here, Matt. We're looking at 97 or so on Saturday. Maximum Security, Matt, he lost last time. He of course, was famously taken down 2 starts ago in a controversial decision in the Kentucky Derby that when he crossed the wire first, he was still an undefeated horse. The stewards took care of that. Then he came back 6 weeks later, and it was really a shocking result in the Pegasus Stakes there, mile 16th at Monmouth Park, when King for a Day hounded, tracked, got to him, collared him, and went on by to edge clear in the Pegasus Stakes, Matt. King for a Day is back. But what does this tell us about Maximum Security heading into another big race? The Pegasus was just a prep. This is the one he's been pointing for since the Kentucky Derby.
I think the only thing that it tells us is that we've got question marks, Brian, heading into the race. He's right now, in my mind, is he going to be that Maximum Security that we saw that rattled off the win streak heading into the Kentucky Derby and crossing the finish line first in the Kentucky Derby, and was that race in the Pegasus just an anomaly coming out of that race, and service didn't quite have him full at training off the race, so we got that question mark. Reports are that he's training well. Same thing for Todd Pletcher and King for a Day.
Yeah, I'm going to throw this out, Matt. Maximum Security, if you look at the speed ratings, or at least the ones I'm looking at, Maximum Security actually got a higher speed rating in the Pegasus loss than he did in the Florida Derby win, a race that preceded the Kentucky Derby. So something to think about. Maybe King for a Day is really a legitimate horse here. We're going to talk about him more in a second. But Maximum Security, he should move forward after the one race prep for the Haskell after coming out of a tough race in the Kentucky Derby. Now his workouts since the Pegasus since the Kentucky Derby have been on the slow side. Not sure what to make of that, but all reports are good. And Maximum Security at his best, I still think he deserves to be a pretty clear favorite in here. This is more than a 2-horse race, unlike the Pegasus was. There are some other good horses in this Haskell. But it'll be interesting to see the rematch. Now, Matt, King for a Day, I did some digging and reminding myself of what happened last year. He ran a pretty good race in his third lifetime race last year. His final race as a 2-year-old to be fourth of 14 in the Kentucky Jockey Club. Doesn't sound great, but he didn't have the best of trips, and he forged to the lead before he got a little short, and he was late on racing for that race. He was actually one of the early horses on the Kentucky Derby future wager, the only future wager of last year. King for a Day was there, Matt. Maximum Security wasn't. Country House, Sir Winston, or War of Will weren't, for a matter of fact. So King for a Day was a well-liked 2-year-old who's now undefeated. Remember, he won the Sir Barton nicely in his return race at 3. So he's 2 for 2 for Todd Pletcher as a 3-year-old.
Yeah, I think after that race in Kentucky, Pletcher recognized that this is a horse that needs a little bit of time, and he gave the horse that time, and he's come back, like you said, with 2 very, very good horses, and that means that that he's a 3-year-old that still may have room for improvement in there. Let me jump back to Maximum Security a little bit, and you're talking about the slow times on his workouts. That's really typical for what Service has been doing with Maximum Security throughout. He's always put him in these long works, miles, and within that mile, he'll go at the beginning. He'll go for 4 furlongs or 5 furlongs faster, and then gallop out and run more in the rest of the mile, or a mile and an eighth. So it a little bit of a different kind of less traditional training style that Service has employed with Maximum Security. So I don't think those times really tell us anything except the reports on Service's horses that he's doing well.
Well, that's good to know, Matt. King for a Day is, I think, a horse that could challenge him again. And then we got to talk about some others here. Certainly the horses that will be played the most in the Haskell after at least the top 2, or maybe even a little bit more for King for a Day, is the Bob Baffert entrant. And of course, Bob Baffert has a rich history in winning the Haskell Invitational. He's done it a bunch, as you know, Matt. He brings in Mucho Gusto, who, I do have a hard time. He's the son of Mucho Macho Man. If you look at the record, it's a really good record. But on the other hand, I have a hard time forgetting about races like the Los Al Futurity last year, where Improbable hooked him and put him away with ease, or this year in the Sunland Park Derby, where Mucho Gusto set the pace and then again was put away with pretty good ease by a couple of horses in the Sunland Park Derby. On the other hand, he's coming in off a couple wins, including the last one in the Affirmed, where he at least showed the ability to not need the lead in the Affirmed. I don't know how much he was rated, but he wasn't on the lead in the Affirmed, and he beat Roadster pretty nicely. What do you make of Mucho Gusto in here?
Well, certainly his last 2 races have been good, with, as you said, a win in the Affirmed when he was stalking the pace over Roadster, and before that in the Las Barrera, where he where he won on the front end. I particularly want to go back and emphasize that stalking trip, because the Haskell field is one where most of the horses want to be right up there pushing the pace. Maybe 1 or 2 of them likes to be out front. So it might serve Mucho Gusto well to be able to run a stalking race in the Haskell.
Yeah, that's true, Matt. We are going to talk certainly more about this pace scenario of the Haskell, but Mucho Gusto really wasn't a horse until the last race, and I don't know if it was a function of being wide with other speed in there, where he got hung out a little bit, and then he was able to sit just off of horses in the Affirm. But he's still got to prove it to me that he can come from behind a little bit. He's coming in off of good work as well, fast work as well, which is typical of Baffert, as you were talking about Service's style. Typical of Baffert horses coming in with strong workouts. Mucho Gusto comes in off a strong workout, a strong win over Roadster in that Affirmed. Another horse we need to talk about that I think gets some play in here, Matt, is Joevia. And one of the first things you notice about Joevia is how fast his workouts have been since a very good Belmont Stakes. son of Shanghai Bobby, of course, had a wild Wood Memorial in which he was way outside. He came crashing over quickly, set a pretty brutal pace in the Wood Memorial, and after all that, he backed out and was disqualified even lower. But then he wired a race at Monmouth Park, the Long Branch, a short field, probably pretty weak field. But then the Belmont Stakes, he set the pace, and he lasted pretty much the entire race, finishing a good third. Joevia comes in here as another speed horse, but another interesting horse in the Haskell field.
Yeah, a speed horse that has shown some quality in here, and we know that he likes the Monmouth Park track. He's going to be running right out of his stall, right in the backstretch, right across from Jason Service's barn. We know the distance isn't going to be an issue. A lot of positives to say in there, but you're right, Brian. He has shown that he likes to be out front in these races, and I guess that's probably where he will be.
Yeah, coming out of the Belmont, you think he might be able to come off the pace a little bit, but those workouts and his running style in most of his races really don't point to that. So I'm with you, Matt. I think Joevia is one of the more likely horses to be out there on the lead. And the Belmont woke me up, and probably woke a lot of people up to his talent. Joevia is the Wood Memorial truly is a throw, and Joevia is a horse, a speed horse with talent that we have to consider in here. Another speed horse of talent, and I think this one will have odds, is Bethlehem Road. Bethlehem Road went to the Ohio Derby on a winning streak, undefeated. And it was kind of a weird race. One of the Luch horses just shot to the lead, and I'm not sure Bethlehem Road knew what to do from there. At first he went up after him fast, and then he backed off a little bit and tried to hold. I don't think the Ohio Derby, I believe he finished fourth in their well-beaten fourth, was his true race. And Bethlehem Road might be a horse who either can be part of this pace that we've been talking about a lot, or might be a talented enough horse to make some noise in the Haskell.
Yeah, it's an interesting horse, and like you said, I think in the Ohio Derby, that Luch horse really threw things off for Bethlehem Road, and he did finish fourth, 20-some lengths behind. But I think at some point the jock just took it easy on him and let him gallop out the rest of the race. Whether it turns out to be another fourth place finish for Bethlehem Road in here, I think the horse is going to be a factor in here in some form, maybe up there pushing the pace with Joevia and getting them going really fast, or maybe hanging on and being a part of the finish. But interestingly, Bethlehem Road is trained by Dee Curry, who is only the fourth woman to have a starter in the Haskell.
Yeah, and I still remember back when Magic Wiesner was a runner-up years ago, Matt. So yeah, it's nice to see a female trainer here in the Haskell, and we talked about maybe the 5 most talented horses in the 7-horse Haskell field, and we've talked about speed from every one of them. So obviously there is a something to note for us handicappers here in the Haskell with a lot of speed. Now, the next horse on the list I want to mention, Matt, has no speed, and that might be his saving grace in the Haskell, if you will. Of course, Dale Romans will bring Everfast to the Haskell. Everfast hasn't missed a lot of dates this year, and save a couple, he hasn't done a whole lot of threatening for the win, but there are a couple good efforts in there. One down in Florida earlier this year at Gulfstream Park, and then, of course, the Preakness, where he really rallied up the rail and finished second to War of Will. Now, Matt, with all the speed we've been talking about, Everfast, as inconsistent as he may be, as a non-winning type of horse as he may be, doesn't this pace scenario really set up for the Dale Romans trained Everfast?
Yeah, Everfast, Brian, at best he's an in and outer, has trouble putting together good races, and the good races that he has put together in here have been second place finishes. Sure, there's going to be a fast pace there, and that's going to be good for him. But how far behind, Brian, is he going to be in the early going on the Monmouth Park track, which doesn't tend to be kind to deep closers? I don't see this as a race where all of these horses that are going to be up on the pace are going to quit. There are going to be two of them, maybe three of them, that are going to be running strong to the wire. So I don't favor Everfast as a horse that's going to win the race. Could he get up into the trifecta at some decent odds? Yeah, I think that's a possibility.
Yeah, I kind of like him to do that, Matt. It'll be interesting to see the odds in here because I think this is a race where it's so clearly slanted towards speed. I think Everfast probably will get a lot more money than he did in the Preakness, for instance, where he was over 20-1. But I think he gets bet more than Bethlehem Road, and I think Bethlehem Road probably is a more talented horse overall. But people are going to see that speed scenario in the Haskell, and Everfast might get that a little bit more. Having said that, I kind of do like him. I do expect him to run his race. He's coming out of the Belmont just like Joe Evia is, and he didn't do a whole lot in the Belmont. But the race before, the Preakness, was very good. Preakness had a strong pace, and Everfast really rallied into it nicely. I think he will rally into this to some extent. I can't make him my top pick either. I think it is unlikely that he passes all these good horses, but I think he's a likely horse to get up into that triple. The only other horse on our list, Matt, that we haven't mentioned yet is Spun to Run, and I'm not sure how much there is to say about this horse. This was a horse who was running decently in maiden races at Aqueduct in the winter and got over to Parks and made it two for two over there, but we haven't seen him since March. He's never run in anything but a minor allowance race, and now he's back for the Haskell. It seems like a stretch. Might be a pretty talented son of Hard Spun, but it seems like a stretch for him in this $1 million Haskell.
Yeah, and you know, another one who fits in that category of horses that typically like to push the pace, although like you said, Brian, it hasn't been in races of this quality.
No, absolutely not. Yeah, it's fun to run. If he does make some noise, it's probably early, but even that, it would almost surprise me if he can be part of this pace scenario against these type of horses. All right, so we've been talking about the pace scenario a lot, Matt. Let's break it down even a little bit more. Maximum Security, King for a Day, Mucho Gusto, Joe Evia, Bethlehem Road. Who are the most likely horses to be on the lead, and who are the most likely horses maybe to sit in the garden spot third or fourth early and be rating, or maybe fourth and fifth early and be rating just a little bit?
Yeah, to me, it would seem like Joe Evia and Bethlehem Road, they're the two that are most likely to be vying for the lead early and want the lead, in my view. And then Maximum Security and King for a Day and Mucho Gusto, I think it would be a good idea, are the likely horses that are going to maybe be in another group, not that far behind those two speed horses, length or a couple lengths behind them.
Okay, I agree with you to an extent on Joe Evia. I think Bethlehem Road probably is pretty close to this lead. I wonder though about the Kentucky Derby winner, Matt. There's nothing in his past performances that makes me think he's comfortable sitting third or fourth early. On the other hand, he has been able to set reasonable fractions, so maybe he's very willing to sit third or fourth, and I think that would be to his benefit on Saturday in the Haskell. If he does that, if he's part of this lead, I think he's beatable, and we might be talking about a horse who's even money-ish, 6-5 here. So it'll be very interesting for me to see where Maximum Security is early. Mucho Gusto, I don't trust either coming off the lead. I know he did it just a little bit in the Affirm, but he's got a lot of speed. Another thing about Maximum Security, let me bounce back to him, Matt, is after the last one where he stumbled out of the gate and then he rushed up, I wonder if they want to just let him go. Of course, they're looking at the past performances too, and they're seeing all this speed, so maybe not. Bethlehem Motor, I think after what happened last time, it makes sense for him to be going out there too a little bit. And Joe Evia has shown nothing but speed. The one horse I think most likely to be able to rate just enough, just to be 3 or 4 lengths off this lead, might be the Pletcher horse, might be King for a Day, might be the horse who's becoming the now horse. 2 wins, Sir Barton and Pegasus. I think he's the second or third choice in here. I think he's more in the 3-1 range. If he can relax just a little bit early, he's got that move. I'm not sure he's a true distance horse, but mile 16 to a mile 8 should be okay. I kind of like King for a Day doing that. And of the 5 that we've talked about, I think he might be the most likely to be able to rate it just a bit.
Yeah, it is a really interesting pace scenario with those 5 horses being similar. It's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. Maybe assuming that they all break alertly out of the gate with the small field, there shouldn't be any excuses. But I think I agree with you, because of the odds, Maximum Security is going to be very short, and King for a Day as a Pletcher horse is going to offer the more favorable odds.
Yeah. So yeah, from a betting standpoint, I do like King for a Day a little bit on that extent. I think Joe Evia will have some odds. If you like Joe Evia, if you love what he did in the Belmont, he's a threat. But I think he'll be the 4th choice and a gap before you get to Joe Evia. So I think King for a Day and Mucho Gusto will be vying for 2nd choice there. And then Joe Evia will be 4th choice. And then you have some odds with Everfast, the Rallier, and Bethlehem Road. And of course, Fun to Run will be the outsider. Matt, what does this race mean for the 3-year-old picture? There's no 3-year-old champion anywhere near set in stone yet this year. Maximum Security wins the Haskell. He moves back to the forefront, maybe. What do you think this race means for the 3-year-old picture?
Well, there's a couple things that we should point out. And one of them is that we are starting to, get towards the end of the Grade 1 races that are restricted for 3-year-olds. We've got the Travers after this, and we've got the Pennsylvania Derby coming. So we're starting to run out of those races. And we also have to keep in mind that this race is a Breeders' Cup win-and-you're-in race into the Classic. Also, so that may play into things later on in the year. But no doubt, Brian, if Maximum Security wins, he's going to jump back up onto the list of up to the top of the division again, and maybe get back into the top 10 poll, as is the case for King for the Day. If King for the Day wins this race, I think it confirms his quality and puts him right into the divisional hunt with horses, that are doing well later in the year, or we expect to, like Mr. Money and Code of Honor and some others as we head to the Jim Dandy and the Travers.
Yeah, good point, Matt. Maximum Security, I think, would be the leader of the division as of Saturday night, but there are big races to come, and I think the Travers will hold even more water in the 3-year-old race. But this Haskell is it's kind of a telltale race for Maximum Security. Is he maybe the best 3-year-old in the country, like so many thought after the Kentucky Derby? We need to see him bounce back from that loss to King for a Day. As for King for a Day, and I think I would say the same about Mucho Gusto. Mucho Gusto has a loss, certainly in the Sunland Park Derby, on his resume, but he's coming off 2 stakes wins as well. So a win by either Mucho Gusto or King for a Day, and suddenly they're in the mix for a 3-year-old Eclipse Award. Joe Evia, this is a race that his connections dearly want to win, and maybe he's this good. And Bethlehem Everfast, horses that might have the talent to pop up here and win it. The Haskell Saturday at Monmouth Park should be an interesting affair for all those reasons. I'm on King for a Day, but I don't have a ton of conviction, and I'd like to see him be the 3rd choice in here, Matt.
Yeah, I think I kind of say this at the end of our Haskell preview show every year. Maybe for a change, this is going to be a Haskell that has a close finish, because traditionally and for many, many years, the Haskell hasn't been close when they come to the wire. But I feel like this one might be a little exciting to the wire.
There you go. That would be fun. All right, Matt, that's what's happening in the Haskell Saturday at Monmouth Park. That's the big race. That's our highlight race of the week. It's important to the 3-year-old picture, as we just talked about a little bit, but so were what happened last week. There was a couple of, they were pretty big favorites, and these races, the Los Al Derby came up short in the field size and quality, and then the Indiana Derby was a little better for quality, certainly better in field size, but certainly we expected to see Game Winner get his first win of the year, and we expected Mr. Money to keep his role going. Both got the job done Saturday in their respective derbies.
Yeah, they sure did. Mr. Money for Brett Calhoun went out to Indiana Grand for the Indiana Derby and put together put his third graded stakes race in a row. Once again, he did it relatively easily. He earned a good speed figure, a 99 Beyer speed figure. He drew out down the stretch to a 2.5 length victory. So Mr. Money continues to build a nice resume as a 3-year-old.
Right, and despite the fact that he's never done it farther than 8.5 furlongs, they are talking at least about the Travers. Maybe the Penn Derby is the more likely next race for Mr. Money, although that's a little bit down the road still. It would be interesting to see him stretch out. I think for what he's doing, he's as good as any 3-year-old in the country, but a mile and 16th to more classic distances are a big question. Maybe he's a Breeders' Cup dirt mile horse down the road, Matt. Now, Game Winner, on the other hand, he certainly looks more like a classic horse. He was our 2-year-old champion, undefeated Breeders' Cup juvenile winner, and then things just never quite worked out in his first 3 races up and through the Kentucky Derby. But nice return race, and suddenly people are talking about him as not only a real Travers contender, but a Breeders' Cup Classic horse.
Yeah, and he did what we asked him to do in the Los Al Derby. He got back to the winner's circle. Like you said, it was only 4 horses. It wasn't, none of them were particularly good, and he did it easily. Got to the lead, extended the lead out to 5 lengths, was geared down, getting close to the wire, got a 96 Beyer speed figure. So he did what was expected of him. Certainly the water is going to get much, much, much deeper as he, I think Baffert said he's going to train up to the Travers, but like you said, the classic distance of a mile and a quarter, we know that he can handle. He did that nicely in the Kentucky Derby.
Yeah, he did that nicely despite his finish where he was just so far back, Matt. And he got beat less than 4 lengths, and as they said on NBC the other day, he ran a lot more than 4 lengths farther than Maximum Security did. So maybe his losses can't be too held against the 2-year-old champion. Mile and a quarter shouldn't be a problem for Game Winner, and with Baffert's history, you got to think that this is a horse who should be primed and ready for the Travers, if not one of the horses to beat in the Travers. Like you said, he did everything he needed to do. He showed everything he needed to show in this pretty simple prep, the Los Al Derby. Mr. Money, Game Winner, certainly 2 of the best 3-year-olds in the country. We also saw one of the best older male mares in the country, Matt. I've always liked Elate ever since we saw her together in her debut performance at Aqueduct just about 3 years ago. She got 10 furlongs in the Delaware Handicap, Matt. I'll tell you what, the way she won it the last 100 yards or so was in style. Let's just say that.
Yeah, I think Belmont was looking for her to have a big performance. He calls her the big girl because she's a big, strong mare at this point. And she was super impressive in there, earning a higher speed figure of 101 and opening up to a very impressive 4.5 length victory.
Yeah, so it was a big performance in the Delaware Handicap match. She was that last 100 yards, she was geared down, and she could have won by much more than she did. It does raise some interesting questions. This was a filly that they were talking about last year as a Breeders' Cup Classic possibility because Mott knows she likes 10 furlongs. So it opens the door again, maybe to the Breeders' Cup Classic, maybe a race like the Jockey Club Gold Cup. A lot of people have been talking about Elate against males because of her affinity for distance. She could not beat Midnight Pursuit earlier in the year. Midnight Pursuit had more racing into her, and maybe Oaklawn Park is a track that Midnight Pursuit likes better than Elate, but Elate certainly looks like the second best older mare right now. Monomoy Girl, we're still waiting to see if she can come back this year. But Elate has some interesting opportunities ahead of her, which could culminate in the Breeders' Cup Classic.
Yeah, and especially Elate would be more favored at the longer distances, at the 1.125 to the 1.25 miles.
Right, and with no real standouts among the older or 3-year-old males, maybe this is the year where a filly or mare can make some noise in the Breeders' Cup Classic. It's been since Zenyatta, of course, since that happened. One more performance from Saturday, Matt, we need to mention, because I thought it was one of the performances of the year, and she hadn't raced since the Breeders' Cup last year, but the apparently the filly and mare turf champion of 2018 is back. And she's back in good form, Matt.
She sure is, Brian. That victory in the Diana was nothing but super in there, facing some formidable stablemates in Rushing Fall and Homerique. Chad Brown also put in a bit of a rabbit in there, and that horse, along with a Belmont runner, set a pretty good pace in there. And turning for home as the pace setters collapsed, it was Rushing Fall that was right there to take over the lead and looked good going down the stretch, but Sistercharlie was right there, and when she was asked, there was that explosive turn of foot again, Brian, and she just went right by Rushing Fall, who we know is just a super horse who had only one loss in 9 starts in her career before that. And Sistercharlie went right by, won by almost 2 lengths, and got the biggest speed figure of her career off of an 8-month layoff, Brian. And that's what is kind of staggering to think about. Could she get even better as the year goes on, and who is she going to face?
Yeah, I don't want to discount Basilica, because what Basilica has done on the West Coast is pretty amazing for over a year now. But these could be the best 2 American imports, or whatever you want to call Homerique, the best 2 turf filly and mares running in America besides her, and she won with ease. Rushing Fall and Homerique had no answers for Sistercharlie's powerful run, and second straight Diana, there's really good reason to believe she'll be collecting her second straight Breeders' Cup filly and mare turf at the end of the year. We got to see which filly and mares come over, of course, from Europe. But Sistercharlie, this was a huge performance, one of the performances of the year. It was bricks and mortar like, and it's just a horse that you need to see run again now, because, like you said, she may be even better than she was last year, and that's a pretty scary proposition for any horse that might run against her. All right, Matt Shipman, we talked about game winner, Mr. Money, Elate, and Sistercharlie, the big stars from last Saturday. This Saturday, we previewed the Haskell rematch, call it a rematch if you must, between Maximum Security and King for a Day, but Mucho Gusto and Joe Evio and others might have something to say about that in the Haskell. Can I get a parting shot from you, my friend?
Absolutely, Brian. I hope everybody takes care and stays cool with the heat that's expected this weekend. But I'll be at the Haskell, and any of you HorseCenter fans that want to say hello, please do so. I love to chat and hear who you like on the Monmouth card. And of course, I want to thank our producer, Brett Workman, for putting together the show. Continued
good times on your travels up there in Saratoga and then to Monmouth Park. Matt Shipman, thank you to Brett, and thank you folks for watching each and every week here on HorseCenter. We sure do appreciate you tuning in to watch us. We want to thank our sponsor as well, the best contest site out there. That's Derby Wars. If you haven't yet subscribed to our YouTube channel here on Horse Racing Nation, please do so now. Enjoy the Haskell, everyone. Have a great weekend. We will be back here to recap the Haskell and, of course, talk about the Big Jim Dandy, which is the following Saturday at Saratoga. Have a great week, everyone. We'll see you next week right here on HorseCenter.